Chapter 16. A Dove Alights. Now, Oleana, this is from Rise Up Singing, page 74. Oleana was one of the many utopian communities which sprang up in the U.S. in the mid-19th century. This one was founded by the famous Norwegian violinist, Ole Bull. This song is an ironic response to high-flown advertising for the new commune. Oh, to be in Oleana, that's where I'd rather be than be bound in Norway and drag the chains of slavery. Oleana, Oleana, Oleana. In Oleana, land is free, the wheat and corn just plant themselves. Then they grow 4 feet a day while on your bed you rest yourself. Oleana. Oleana, Oleana. Beer as sweet as Budweiser springs from the ground and runs away. The cows all come and milk themselves, and the hens lay eggs 10 times a day. Little roasted piggies rush all about the city streets, inquiring so politely if a slice of ham you'd like to eat. Aye, if you begin to live to Oleana, you must go. The poorest wretch in Norway becomes a duke in a year or so. So, that is the prelude. Now here we rejoin our story. On a dark night near morn, we found a concealed place in live oaks and mangroves, just a few miles from St. Mark's, a fishing village near the mouth of the Apalachicola River. We dared not approach yet to our countrymen, if they still were our countrymen, or ever were. Oh, what a tragic world I've inherited. But I shall not sell my birthright to Ahab. Beginning at dawn, we held a stormy and stressful council all day long. Thanks to the mayor of Port-au-Prince in Haiti, we could plan to land at our Oleana. But first, what about the ship? As soon as the Yankees saw it, it was off to greedy hands, and we off to jail. We surely must have, or Kathy and I must have broken a Tsetse law or two, and they were all accomplices. Case closed. Jim Smith, with a nervous eye, wished for his brother John, but his first mate Claghorn stood by him and stood with him for the Smith Brothers family group. Also a corporation, of course. But blood is thicker than water and more precious than gold. Jim hesitantly pleaded to take the ship back to Boston with a skeleton crew, but we all objected. We'd never make it. It was jail to be seen. Plus, few sailors wanted to return to Puritan, cold New England. And he too could perhaps be put on trial, as of course he'd known all along. But poor Jim was as if awakening from a long, pleasant dream to find a cold stove and winter coming on. Nonetheless, he saw the point. What of the Jacksonites themselves? Well, we didn't know much about them, but we figured they couldn't use the ship. They were outlaws, or were they forest spirits? It was a magnet for the law. But perhaps the Vesta could be dismantled and used in a frontier settlement for buildings? Going on what my dear Arthur Arbuthnot had told me. Thus I felt we could respect and reuse those good saviors, the tough, hardy Vermont white oak keel and oak and noble pine tree boards in our blessed vessel. Of course, that ignores, but we did not, the little matter of the ship being worth around $250,000 to the Smith. Now that's grand larceny, no matter how Kathy and Jim could slice it, no matter what spurious papers even Sanger could cook up. No, even our comic genius could not save us and our vessel. Talent was indeed our greatest treasure with our love, and that which our freedom had enabled to blossom could not be taken from us. Kathy was decisive, and in many ways she was in charge. Boudica of ancient Britain, the warrior queen who burned Roman London, would have been proud of our Kathy. She proposed to a free assembly of equal souls, she noted. She proposed to find the Jacksonites, to join them, and to give them all we wished of our treasures, except the money. moolah, cabbage, dough, bucks. That, she said at some length, was too dangerous. We soon saw the point. Her reasoning was as clear as silver, as her silver hair. She said, I feel now like Captain McNaughton, God bless him wherever he is. I feel I have, and we all have come here as fate has led us, and here we will find a home. But friends, please, I beg you, keep your money concealed at first. Don't talk of it either. I foresee, after a month or two perhaps, some of us or all might want to leave and go our separate ways. As Captain McNaughton said, God bless you, everyone. Or I, and maybe you, just might like it here and stay. Then we can again counsel our crew and our animal friends, and then maybe make a gift of our remaining cash and split it up as we all did off San Francisco. Yeah, some listening people cheered. Someone whistled. But Kathy went on, but let's do it all together. After much talk, we adopted this plan with sorrow. Our idyll had ended. Now what? What if we didn't like mosquitoes and alligators and cottonmouths, and they returned the favor? Or what if the Jacksonites stole all we had and expelled us? Oh well. Tom Paine knew that it wasn't easy. He spent a lot of time in jail. Next day, in blessed calm weather, rather hot for early May, our jungly whaleboat with the tartan inside scouted the river mouth for a channel deep enough to bring Vesta upriver. The mighty and slow Apalachicola River slumps towards its mouth into a huge cloaca of dark brown, unknown, murky, tree-shadowed shallows. Not a river for clippers. We hoped our bark, now drawing 8 or 9 feet, would fit into a channel up the river to concealed anchorage. We had, of course, bypassed the town of St. Mark's, but we saw 2 small fishing boats who hailed our crazy-looking whaleboat, but we successfully played dumb. Only Malinche spoke, and she shouted at them excitedly in broken, incomprehensible Portuguese. The fishermen sort of laughed, but all suspicious-like, and went back to fishing. Away from them and out of sight for now, we dropped our lead repeatedly and found the magic number of Mark Twain, or 2 fathoms, 12 feet, a safe depth for most ships, ours included. Still, we knew we would be talked about excitedly in St. Mark's, and we had to move fast to disappear our ship. As soon as darkness fell, we rowed back to her and guided her up the long-sought river as snake birds and egrets watched. Probably alligators, too. But it was dark, just a fingernail of moon and scudding clouds. But it was fairly calm on the water. Gentle southwest airs, near perfect. No turning back for Vesta. With all 3 boats out ahead, 2 towing us with lines for steerage way if needed, and plumbing the depths constantly, we found a channel near the east bank. As the mayor had said, we eased our way upriver. Splashes in the dark told of gators in the waters. One bull gator roared on the far bank to the west. Probably a Texan, I thought. I didn't like Texans. Big, arrogant bullies. A mile or 2 up past a concealing bend, we found an old oxbow lake that would barely hold our ship. Tall trees, gums, and live oaks concealed Vesta somewhat. We had already begun to strip the sails and lace, etc., off the top of the masts for just this kind of concealment until we could dismantle her. That would be upriver when we found the settlement. Junette's chick, Squawk, was hatched and newly fledged, hopping happily on deck and learning to fly so we could safely dismantle the nest box on the mizzenmast. We got Vesta hidden, not with a lot of time to spare. At dawn, a Yankee gunboat came down the river, bristling in all directions. She was one of the Monitor's children, a two-turret wonder, two cheese boxes on a raft, as we used to say. 4 parrot guns, of course, not 2. Deadly and efficient in calm river waters. We were all hidden well, though, in this sleek, shiny Monitor lizard dragon. It slid past us, its steam engine filling the wide brown waters with its purring chuck, 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 chuck. Good engines they had. We noted the channel in its wake. She drew 5 feet only, we knew. They saw us not. Good thing. She was the Montauk, I think. She had been at Mobile Bay. The Montauks, of course, themselves were another extinct tribe of Long Island, like the nearby Pequods. What irony. I knew who they were looking for, same as we were. We decided to take only the jungle whaleboat upriver, cautiously. We had green tarpaulins and branches lashed to her for further camouflage. It worked, I guess, but we rode upstream mile after mile with only the sounds of water birds and a mad white-billed woodpecker's loon-like cry. But around mid-afternoon, as our tiring sailors pulled on, noting the channel in a notebook with depth every few minutes, a dugout canoe emerged behind us, unseen by us. We had passed it as it lay right under an overhanging sandy bank, under a mass of roots there, like unruly gorgon hair from a fallen bald cypress tree. The canoe was manned by 5 men, 3 large Negroes, and 2 large brown Indians with some sort of turban-like headgear on. They came alongside boldly, each carrying calmly in his lap a long rifle, well tended and polished. "Who are you?" asked the largest black man. They were all naked, except hats and shorts of various types. In the canoe were fish, poles, a net, and bags and tarps. Some crabs were visible, too. Sanger, our chosen spokesman, with his southern accent, spoke up. "We're Americans, home again after a trip around the world. We're looking for a safe harbor for a whaling ship's crew who has freed themselves." The strangers narrowed their eyes at this high-flown speech. I, Lolo, Adam, Claghorn, and Kathy looked on. The 2 Indians said something in their tongue to their boat's crew. They all looked at each other and nodded. Then, beckoning, they led our boat almost silently farther upriver. At last, near evening, we found ourselves at least 25 miles up the river, which reminded me strongly of a delta channel of the Amazon, except that the Spanish moss here garnished every limb, sometimes hanging 15 feet of gray-green soft pond. Here the east bank was indented by a large dark bayou that marked a large oxbow-type lake. We had passed at least a dozen of these lakes already. These arc-shaped lagoons, the remnants of old meanders of the river, they abound on the Mississippi also. As we knew from our hasty hiding place downstream for Vesta, shallow water prevented much penetration by boats. This one, however, this lake seemed to be deeper, perhaps dredged out, and continued under Spanish moss and dark jungle on and on. Well out of sight of the main river on the left, our silent guards motioned us to land. Silence was the rule, obviously. Here was a tangle of cypresses, with knees standing in water around a big flat area of writhing bare roots on the bank. Here were about 15 alligators in a pile, all sizes, with 2 huge ones in the center. Motioning us to stay back, one of the dugout's crewmen whistled one peculiar cry, and the two huge gators suddenly began to bite and attack all their smaller fellows. In a flash, gators squirmed in all directions to get away. The two giants were left alone, snapping. The two creek paddlers cooed softly at them, gave them a fish apiece, and said, "Good boys, good boys," and something or other in their own tongue. They threw several large fish a ways back in the jungle, and the two gators raced each other for them. Then the biggest black man grinned at our astonishment and said, "Y'all don't need to worry about them. Them's good old Tom and Charlie." I blurted out, "Which is which?" The big goof shrugged. "Who knows? We just calls them all Tom and Charlie. Just the friendly ones, that is." They clearly felt safer in talking here in private. But our questions were rebuffed with shaken heads in the reply, wait for our elders to counsel over you." This place proved to be their secret port for their settlement, concealed by very clever ways. First, the five picked up their dugout canoe and walked it over roots where no prints could be seen to a nearby tiny clearing totally screened by riotous tinsel icicles of Spanish moss. By the way, as we found soon, this plant made good soft bedding until the local biting creatures which lived there awoke in their throngs. Our hosts, laughing later that night, showed us several methods to rid the moss of them, but I'm getting ahead of myself. First, we had to conceal our boat like the dugout, and then tread a perilous path through the swamps. As we six struggled to lift our heavy whaleboat, the three of the five of them lent a hand, and the boat fairly flew to its mossy hiding place. No tracks showed, and soon gators would again swarm that spot. Fish were always left there for this gang of unwitting sentries. And as we found, gators were not hunted within a mile or two of the spot. Later, this became an issue. Patience, reader. My amazement grew as we began an hour-long foot journey. We were all heavily laden. The Oxbow Lake was crossed by an underwater corduroy log causeway, invisible in 6 inches of brown, muddy water. It took a zigzag course across open water for 100 yards, making 2 turns in mid-lake. A step off either side meant, we were told, a horrible death by quicksand. Even our sure-footed guides probed with long sticks to find the pavement before each step they took. Once back on swampy land, the path skirted large trees with drier root tangles and followed pig and deer trails where animal tracks were many. A couple of concealed tree stands appeared after we passed them, stocked with neatly hung silent bows and arrows for a hasty defense if needed. False branches of the trail forked off invitingly. Some led, they told us, to pitfalls, a seesaw-type trap, distracting carrion for dogs, poisoned underwater spikes, and other goodies for slave catchers or Yankees. It was brilliantly obscure, the path, with fox-like doublings back. I was strongly and eerily reminded of my Britannic ancestors, who had their villages protected from Romans and Saxons and lions in lakes and peat bogs with causeway access like this here. Here, concealment topped defense as a strategy. Guerrillas always must use stealth against superior force. The last defense was a wide, deep moat with a drawbridge around a square stockade or fort of round logs deeply set vertically, sharpened on top. Nearby, a short path led to a large rectangular cleared court with Greek chickees or pole and thatch houses all around. It was very like a Hawaiian village. Here we counseled with a crowd of people, mostly black, many brown, and maybe one-fifth white. Women and children were present, many of them. People came and went freely under a shade of poles and green leafy branches. There was no secrecy. The only guns we saw at this time were those 5 that we had seen in the canoe. All this pleased me. I guessed that the fort had been moved several times since poor Arthur Arbuthnot's long ago visit. I was right, it turned out. The present access was certainly superbly concealed. I don't see how any animals could get in or out unless they were carried or swam. Not even a goat or a burro would tread that underwater causeway. The elders whom we met then were headed by 6. These 6 were all male, but intent faces of older women surrounded them. Some faces were scowling. As I learned soon, women made many decisions here. The 2 Creek Indians spoke first. As we learned soon, they were the elder brothers, so to speak, in an egalitarian, triracial confederacy. The elder Creek, tall and splendid, named Talachua, spoke. We greet you, fellow escapees, if that is who you are. We see that you carry no guns, and your unusual boat speaks of your good hearts. As our guests now, we trust that you may not be spies. And as good guests should, we ask you to explain yourself. All 6 of us took turns explaining our mission and request for asylum. Our various accents, gender, and skin color drew quiet comments and approval all around. We opened our hearts, especially Kathy and myself. I needn't tell you all we said. And at last we fell silent after a half hour or so. We had not spoken of our wealth. There was no hurry to reply. The crowd muttered low. About 150 people had gathered almost silently. We were in the circle. The 6 elders facing us quietly and calmly smoked a long chanupa or peace pipe with prayer and ceremony to the great mystery. The sacred chanupa was then offered to us, and then around the outer circle, clockwise, sunwise. Tasted to me like Louisiana Perique tobacco, strong and pungent, mixed with, perhaps, red willow bark. It was surely loaded with love, or its cautious promise. At last, the large black man from the dugout spoke. He was perhaps 45 years old, named Brutus. I later learned his name was a cruel joke on the part of his former master, who was also his father secretly. Brutus and 6 companions had hung him from a tree before leaving for Fort Jackson 2 years before. Brutus's last words to his strangling master, whose name was Edward Caesar, were, "Et tu, Brute?" Brutus now said, "Yeah. God must have led you here," glancing at us. He glanced to either side for keen return glances. "I can trust you. I think, brothers and sisters," again he looked around, "that we could use this ship for timber and this crew too, because they too are sound timber." A murmur of approval to this apt image. Beside Brutus, a small, shriveled old black man covered with sparse, curling white hairs spoke. "My brother Brutus speaks well. These are escaped slaves, even as we are." He spoke with a strange foreign lilt. I learned later he was from northern Nigeria, where a clever foe had enslaved him. His name was Haji Ali, because he had once made a pilgrimage or Hajj to holy Mecca. He managed the Jacksonites' horse herd and cattle and sheep too. All knew him as Hi Jolly. The next speaker was a white man, not tall, but a very keen eye, dressed in fringed buckskin and watchful dignity, plus a northern blue cavalry hat with egret and blue hair and plumes. I approved his costume silently. This was Ishmael Bowles. His brother Absalom was beside him, much taller. William Bowles, to my regret, was long dead, but he had named these two sons with a fine sense of irony. Ishmael said, I agree. These people's music and art and skills could help us get more support locally if we dare to show it. Perhaps a traveling show in dugouts? He mused momentarily, and then said, I'm sorry, brothers and sisters, I'll not waste your time. You know our numbers have been depleted lately. He looked at the black contingent. And we need new hands, even penniless ones. I'll listen now. Absalom nodded as his brother sat down. Eyes turned to Talachua. The senior or most honored person at a gathering always spoke last and sometimes first also at their councils. He rose. Talachua glanced askance at his squat brother Tamandua, who sat next to him. Tamandua had small, squinting eyes and folded arms. He said, without rising from his seat, he said, I agree, they seem to have good hearts. But we have been tricked before. And remember, when only one of us was captured alive in Father's time, our town was burned, and we nearly all died in the swamp. For these reasons, my people, I say, these 6 must not leave here until their story can be checked. Grunts of approval and soft ho, ho, ho's were heard. Ho or aho meant, or how meant, yes, amen. Finally and slowly, Talachua spoke. If this tale is true, and we see their ship of wonders, I feel that we can agree to take them in with welcome. It will be very dangerous to get their ship near here and to take her apart, but I feel it is a good gamble. And it is more dangerous to let the Yankees find it. He made a gesture as of throwing dice, but looked significantly upward, then down at Mother Earth. All understood his eloquent body language. He said, I have spoken. I call for an agreement by silence. These must stay, and if we find they do not lie, all may come and harbor here. In the sudden blessed silence, the restless crowd stilled itself. We all heard the long, joyful, tuneful melody of a mockingbird from a huge live oak behind the chief's house. After his echoes had died to breezy stillness, Talachua spoke. It is well. The birds approve. It is decided. Let us rest now and get to know one another. Our guests must be tired and hungry too, and probably very afraid. He smiled kindly. Welcome, brothers and sisters. Fear not. An immense cheer was heard, and the younger braves did a lively and fierce creek stomp dance in the big dance square. End of chapter 16.